everyone, welcome to another episode of Convos with Sazón with yours truly, Cata Mejía. With me today is Dee Kundra. She is the Managing Director of the Americas for FC Bayern Munich. Welcome, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Thanks for having me, Cata.
I am so excited to be here with you. There is so much to talk about because it is an exciting time as ever for the club. And
yes.
We will get into that. Before we get into who you work with and what you do within the club itself, I'd like to give people an introduction of who you are first and foremost.
Sure.
So think about your early beginnings. Tell me a little bit about your childhood. What was that like? Did football always have a role in your life, or did that come later?
So I was born and raised in London, and I am the youngest of three siblings. My brother and sister were quite a bit older than me, and my brother always wanted a little brother, and when I was born, he was very upset I was a girl, and after a while he realised, hey, I can still get her to do all the things I'd want a little brother to do anyway. So I was a tomboy, grew up a tomboy. He used to wrestle and, all sorts of fun things that you do with a little brother. So I definitely grew up a tomboy. But funnily enough, in our household, we were more of an F1 household. Even though I lived and grew up in London, we didn't really have football on in the house all the time. So, and, my brother wasn't a supporter, neither was my sister. So where I was exposed to it was at school, because everyone was either a Liverpool fan or a Man United fan.
Mm-hmm.
So when I actually started working in football, it was like becoming a fan as an adult, because I very quickly realized I had to choose a team in order to kind of really pick up the nuances of the game and understand supporter culture. So the first game I went to was a Spurs v Blackburn game, and I chose Spurs as my team.
Okay.
Yeah.
What a story, honestly, because some people maybe have the misconception that in order to work in sports, you need to have lived, breathed from day zero.
Mm-hmm.
So you're living proof that that's not necessarily the case, and you can learn it on the fly.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And even more so, I studied fashion management at the London College of Fashion, thinking I was always going to have a career in fashion, did lots of work experience and realised that it wasn't the industry for me. And then I fell into music, was working on the big music events in the UK, and that I was doing that for a while, PR for these events, and it was fantastic. Enjoyed it. And I went to an organisation which was then called the Prince's Trust, which is now the King's Trust. And it's a charity which basically helps young people into work, training or education via sport, music or fashion. And they used to do all the big events like Party in the Park and Fashion Rocks, and that's what I went there to work on. And then they kind of said, yeah, we're a charity. We're not going to do so much of these events because they're very high risk. So actually, we're going to cut those down a bit. So I was like, well, what am I going to do? And they said, you can work on the sports initiatives. And at the time, it was cricket, rugby and football. So I was like, okay, I have transferable skills in marketing and PR. I can do this. And that's honestly how it happened. So I really fell into sport, but realised I loved it. I loved the team camaraderie of it. I loved working with the media. It was a really great experience and I fell in love with it.
I love that. Let's backtrack a little bit to fashion, because you said it wasn't what you thought it would be.
No.
What were you expecting, and what did you realize once you got into that world?
I think I was expecting the glamour of it, doing all these fashion shows and, piecing together all these amazing events around it. But the day-to-day of it it's really hard and quite cutthroat. I think it's a very strong personality that you need to be to kind of navigate it day to day. And while I am a strong personality, it wasn't something that I felt was right for me.
Yeah.
And that's when I fell into sports and I knew, this is me. This is that team camaraderie that I was saying, that feeling of working, achieving something together as a team, the winning also. I am very competitive, so I like the winning.
It also seems like there's a common thread between the journey that, you took to get to sports and the different aspects of it, which is that interest in the experiential aspect of it. So talk about how that now comes into play in terms of balancing the behind the scenes, the day to day, and simultaneously juggling all these hats to plan events and to really bridge what is now, the club and also the community fan base, since I know that's at the core of what you all do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think all of my past experiences in sport, music and fashion, it's basically culture. It is kind of what shapes culture. So I've worked in these elements of it and they all fit together in some way or another. And I think that was a great learning for me. And what I've learned now in terms of fan culture, especially here in the States. So Bayern Munich has had an office here since 2014 off the back of the last World Cup win for Germany. So we've been here for that long and we've really kind of learned about the culture and, what's needed, how we can support on and off the field, etc. And I think what we find here is that there's a real star culture. People follow players rather than teams. So there's a lot that we do in terms of player profiling, etc. But also the things that is attracting soccer fans is not just on field. It's the jerseys, it's the gaming, it's the events around it. It's that kind of tribal fan culture, which you find in college football, that we find that people are attracted to. It's funny, I've walked down the street and someone will be wearing a really obscure jersey and I'm like, oh, you're a fan? No, I just like the look of the jersey. So that's really interesting being from Europe and kind of like we never change our clubs. Once you've chosen it, that's it. There's no change in it. So that was really interesting for me as a learning.
That's fascinating that you mentioned that because, we are in the middle of the World Cup.
Yes.
And you just mentioned fashion at the intersection of sports and also music. I mean, FIFA announced and always does, the theme song, but also now a playlist. And so it really is this all-encompassing experience where whether or not you're following a team or you're following a player or you're just happy to be here, there's a place for everyone. So let's talk about how you got to New York.
Yes.
Was it with the club? Was it prior? Talk about that journey.
Yeah, no, it wasn't with Bayern. I actually, back in the UK, after I worked for the Prince's Trust, I moved to an agency where I looked after Barclays sponsorship of the Premier League. And then I worked at Liverpool Football Club. So I lived in Liverpool for a while. Great club, great experience. But I always wanted to live and work in New York. There was something about this city that I just felt so drawn to and knew I had to be here. And an opportunity came up with the New York Cosmos. That was in 2015. So I jumped at it with both hands and joined the New York Cosmos. And I was there for a year and a half. And then Bayern were looking for someone to come in-house and oversee all marketing and communications. And then I joined 9 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you feel like time has flown by?
Yes. When I say I've been there for 9 years, it feels like I've been there 3. It just feels like time has flown. So much has happened in that time. You see players come and go. You see great seasons and then good seasons and then not so good seasons. So it feels like it's been a lot less than 9 years.
How would you say FC Bayern Munich has evolved while your role has simultaneously evolved? Because I'm sure it goes hand in hand, of when you oversee marketing and communications, not only just in the US, but all of the Americas. There are so many factors that go into that. So talk about the behind the scenes of what it takes.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we first set up the office, it was purely a marketing office and the focus at the start was just the US. And we very quickly realized that, hang on a minute, there's Mexico, huge market. There's Brazil, huge market for us with all of the past Brazilian players that we've had. And then over time, Colombia has become a huge market for us as well. We had James, obviously, and now with Lucho, these are incredible markets. So our focus, we would love to cover every single one, but we have to narrow it down because the continent is just so huge. So our focus areas are US, Canada, Mexico, Brazil, and Colombia.
Okay.
And the culture, going back to your point about what is the experience like and how is it different? It's very different. So in the US, it's very much about educating people on the sport. This is football. This is what it looks like. This is why you should support it because of the culture. And, and this is how the game works. And yes, we go 45 minutes without a break. But then in Latin America, football is the number one sport and everyone has their local team. Everyone has their team. So we're not trying to become people's team there. We're trying to become their international team or their German team or, their European team. So that's the difference between the audiences and how we then market to them.
Precisely because of the differentiation in audiences, do you find that the entry point is different? And I ask because for Colombia right now, as you mentioned, previously it was James, now it's Lucho. So how are you all thinking of still maintaining that fan base, regardless of whether or not the players that they initially came for stay?
Yeah. And we had this experience with James. We saw a massive jump in social media following from Colombia. And when he left, surprisingly, a lot of them actually stayed. And I think the reason is because Bayern is such an authentic club. And we've always kind of said, no one player is bigger than the club. That's why on the back of our jerseys, FC Bayern is on top and the players' names are on the bottom. And that's kind of how we've always behaved. So when people come into the club or they start following us, they start realizing we're much more of a family. So then it becomes hard to leave because then you see how the club acts and you see, the way the players play and the respect and the, dignity and all that sort of stuff. So I think when it matters to people with their own values, then they kind of tend to stay as
100%.
well.
You mentioned family, and you and I met a few weeks ago, and we'll get to the reason behind the meeting. But one of the things that both you and your colleagues mentioned consistently was, yes, this is work. However, the team really is a family, and that extends to every aspect of it. So how would you say FC Bayern is different in that sense? Because it's very easy to say it, right?
Yes.
But it's a whole other different thing to walk the walk and talk the talk,
Absolutely. So on one side, we call ourselves the world's biggest family. And on one side, it is factually correct because we have over 400,000 members, more than any other club, because we're member owned. We have over 1 billion followers and we have over 100 fan clubs in the US and worldwide, thousands. So factually, we are the world's biggest family. In that family is not just our players, our staff, our fans, it's our partners as well. So, we kind of look at that as a whole. And on the other side, it's the feeling that we give. It's, Bayern Munich is a very special club in the sense that they look after their players. They look after their staff. They look after people in ways that you might not see with other clubs. COVID is a prime example. During COVID, Bayern back in Munich actually helped other smaller clubs financially to keep going throughout that time because obviously it was a very difficult time. But that's what Bayern does because it was for the good of football. And that's the kind of feeling that it gives, which is why we call it the world's biggest sports family.
Yeah, there's a big sense of belonging, both those who already feel like they belong and attracting those that might be looking for that sense of belonging. And I bring that up because going back to what I was mentioning just now of how we met, you all very recently launched a community exploration series, right? And it's a 4-part series focused on the 4, I'm not going to say core necessarily, but 4 prominent communities, both represented in your players and the extension of the players. So talk a little bit more about that, what the 4 communities were, and also how that is one of the many ways that you all, again, practice what you preach and really showcasing inward and outwardly what you all mean by that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it goes a little bit further back in terms of we all knew the World Cup was coming. So it was a case of, okay, well, what are we going to do about it? And we're sitting there and we're thinking about all these content ideas. And we kind of stopped and we're like, hang on a minute. There's a Bayern player in every single one of the last 11 World Cup finals. There is 17 Bayern players currently playing in the World Cup. Like, we are not creating content for the World Cup. We are part of the story. In football's biggest moment, we are there through our players. So then it became about how do we link it to the country. There's over 100 communities in the US. You can find every pocket, Senegalese, Colombian, Indian, you can find almost every community. And that was beautiful to have the World Cup in such a diverse nation. So we really wanted to kind of play up on that. So we kind of picked some communities that align with our players and created a docuseries that basically looked at first and second generation immigration and how football basically helped bring them together and settle in and, create community.
Talk a little bit more about what those communities were. I remember Colombians in New York.
Yeah.
And the direct tie to Lucho Diaz, obviously. There were 3 others. Go ahead.
Yes, there was the Francophone in Montreal we had. And then there's the German community in Florida, in Miami specifically. And then there's a Korean community in LA.
Yeah.
And each story, the personalities in each of the documentaries very, very different, but they talk about how, for example, the Colombian one, it's focused on this gentleman who basically his mother used to have a cart and she used to sell arepas from it, and how that kind of business has grown, but the community has grown and how they settled into life in New York. But the way he talks about it is just very moving.
Yeah.
And then you have Diaz talking about how, community, Colombian culture, how it is so important and how it's so kind of fused together and is like one big family.
Yeah.
So, that's really what the docuseries is about, and it's really moving. And I don't know if you saw the Korean one, but there were some tears. And
yes, I have now seen all of them, and I don't want to give too much more away because I want to give people a reason to watch all 4. It was very well made. As a storyteller myself, it really does take a lot of skill, piecing everything together, making sure that you give credit to all the stories. And I also give credit to those who were shooting it and the editing, because it is no easy feat to pick and choose, especially when it's so rich in culture, in anecdotes, in storytelling, and in history. And I really love that there were different points of view. Like, yes, there were players, but also there were internal team members, there were community members, and you all were very masterfully able to find the intersection of where they all meet, which is the club and what it stands for. So I think that's beautiful. Another thing that I want to talk about is the fact that you keep on mentioning how you all are part of the story.
Yeah.
It's not just moments in time. It's this continuous period. And so talk about that, because there are events that you all prepare for, and there are events that you all host, and the World Cup comes and goes. And so do other, league tournaments and things along those lines. So how do you hone in with your team on what to focus on in what point in time? And also, how far in advance are you planning for that?
Yeah. I want to say very far in advance that we know things are coming, but somehow it always ends up very last minute. It feels, because things come up. As time moves on, you have different conversations with different people, and then you realize actually this is more important to do in this market because it relates more to people. So things change all the time. And for us, we've learned over the years, it's very much about doing less but impactful activations. We could do so many little different things, and that's great. But for us, it's more about what is going to be most impactful, what is going to reach new eyeballs, but what caters for our current fans, makes them feel closer to the club, even though they're miles away from the team in Germany. So it's all of those pieces that we're trying to put together whilst relating it to the US. And I say the US, but every state is like a different culture in itself. So it's really kind of tailoring to different states within the US as well as Mexico, Brazil, Colombia. So a lot of work goes into it. We have a team from Brazil, Colombia, Germany. I'm from the UK. So we have lots of different representations in the office, and that really helps us. We learn from each other. We understand each other's market. Our German colleagues really help us understand the club, the DNA of it, the way they talk about it. And, for example, other colleagues from Brazil and Colombia, and they're like, no, but this is what matters. This is what matters here. And this is how we need to approach it. So, it's really interesting. It's lots of learnings along the way. But I think that's important.
Yeah, you mentioned something that I wanted to talk more about, which was representation and the role, in your opinion and experience, of course, that global clubs play in representing.
Yeah.
Simply because of what you mentioned, within the same country that you just mentioned, United States, every region is different. Much more if you're talking about a continent as a whole, and then you kind of take a step even further back and the globe, because it is a global club. So what would you say about that responsibility and the care that you all put towards it and incorporating it in everything that you all do in different degrees?
Yeah, I think, I've felt this kind of at every club that I've worked for. Bayern in particular is very, very, very strong on, the Bayern way in terms of, respectful, dignified, confident, not arrogant. I know that's a big conversation.
And there's a fine line too.
Yeah, I know. Exactly. So, those are kind of the values that are top down, actually, when you speak to our board, when you speak to former players, they all talk about Bayern in a certain way. Like there's an expectation of behavior, which trickles down through to everybody at the club. So doing the right thing is very important. The club does a lot of work in Germany within communities, back a lot of different initiatives, but don't shout about it. It's incredible, actually. So it's really important and really part of the club's DNA.
Yeah. There's something that you mentioned earlier, specifically as it relates to the US towards football culture, and it's the fandom aspect of it. And when we talk about fandom, one would argue that the club is kind of at the middle point, right? You connect the communities, you connect the fans or otherwise with the players themselves. Talk about that relationship and how you find a balance and you allow through projects like these and other events for the community to feel a little bit closer to both the club and simultaneously the players. Yeah,
it's really important to do that wherever we can. We always talk about, when we come on tour, it's really about, this is the pinnacle of the year because we play in Germany or we play in Europe. So we don't get to play in front of our fans' home ground. So this summer we're going to go to Korea. So our fans over there will be able to experience the team on their home turf, which is really important. And then the other 360 days that we're not playing here are really important to keep people, fans, followers close. So then we really focus on how are we communicating. There's the direct communication with our existing fan clubs, fan members, always kind of sharing information. How can we give you more? How can we let you know what you can get involved in? How can we let you know about what our partners are doing? And sharing that information, as well as, what are we doing to really kind of connect with those people and tell the story of Bayern Munich. So when we talk to businesses, for example, when we're talking to brands, we always talk about how Bayern is so financially responsible. We don't overspend on players. We have been in profit for the last 30 years. We own our stadium outright. Those are our financial values, if you like. And that really wants to make brands kind of align with that because that's a really strong message. When we talk to our fans, it's like, we're a fan first mentality. We're member owned. Our fans come first. German football is very much, about real fan culture. So, how are we giving you access to the club without you actually being there? So that is through storytelling. That is things like getting a legend on a video call. It's things like them feeling like they have direct messages from, the board or, other players, for example.
You mentioned just now partners.
Yeah.
And I want to talk a little bit about that because I feel like in the society we live in today, consumers, clients, fans, whatever you want to call them, the public is a lot more savvy, and they're not just going to blindly support something for what they represent, but they're also going to think about the extension of the brand, or in this case, the club. So you mentioned what the club stands for and the core values. How do you all put that at the forefront when considering who to partner with? Like, is that also something value aligned among other things that you all think about?
100%. Absolutely. It's really important that, we practice what we preach and we align with brands that share similar values. I think one of the most interesting things about that side of the business as well is that the average partnership lasts for 10 years.
Wow.
I mean, that's
a long time.
That's a long time, but that's just the average. I mean, we've been with many of them for over 50 years. So, you know, that just shows the strength of how, you know, we're growing together, how we're finding new ways to kind of reach each other's objectives, and do it together in an aligned way with similar values.
And the loyalty that you mentioned earlier, which extends to every aspect of what you all do. You've mentioned that it's a pivotal moment for football in North America specifically. The World Cup is happening right now. You know, you all have a presence, as you mentioned earlier. What would you say makes 2026 so pivotal?
Well, so many things. But the 1994 World Cup back in the States is still the best attended World Cup ever in history.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it is. And obviously this one will shatter those records because there's just more games. So hopefully we'll see those records shattered. So that's kind of, first of all, that will go down in history. But I think also it's a really important time for football in general. Like, people are really getting excited about football. People that have never gone to watch a game before or don't even watch it regularly have, you know, got tickets to the World Cup and be like, okay, we're going to go. It's going to be an experience. And all of a sudden they're like, I need to go to the next one. I need to go to another. They're so bought into that culture. So I think we're going to see a lot more fans come out of it. And I think it's for how are all the parties in the US, you know, going to react to that? Like, what are we going to put into place? One of the things that we're actually doing, you know, I mentioned we've been in the market for 11 years, but in September, we actually open our own academy on the West Coast, which is very exciting.
You beat me to it. I was going to ask for an inside scoop or exclusive, and here we go.
There we go. So that's opening in September. We haven't opened our own academy before in the Americas, and it's purely because there was a lot of learning to be done on our side, and we didn't want to create something which didn't complement the existing system or just became competitive. We really wanted to create something that supported the growth of the game. So that is launching in September, and I think we've got a few more exciting announcements coming out about that as well.
I want to know what goes into those decisions. You know, you mentioned there was a lot of learning before taking that step. Why the West Coast? What can people expect from an academy? Like, is that kind of like a pipeline potentially for younger players? Talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the West Coast, it was intentional. We have a partner in LAFC who are on the West Coast as well. So we have a joint venture with them. So it was important for us to be close by and work together with them also. The other thing that we always talk about is our advanced grassroots program. So every club will tell you that they will give young people a pathway to professional football. We know it is very, very unlikely that everyone is going to go and play for Bayern Munich's first team, because that is a different level. So we've created what we call an advanced grassroots program, which basically you can go on these different programs, and each time you are given a platform to be identified or to move on to the next program or into the next academy. And basically what that does is it gives you opportunity. And also, while you might not play for Bayern Munich's first team, you may play for the first team of another team. And our network globally allows us to kind of create those moments and opportunities, and we've actually seen some success from it. We had a young player, Maicon, who made his first team debut in January this year. He was on our World Squad program, then he went to our Global Academy. We signed him for the U19s, and then he was training with company in the first team regularly, and then made his debut in January. So we know there's a system that works. It's very credible. It's very authentic, you know, and it's not a case of it's Bayern coaches on the ground working with these age groups. So we're really excited about that, and focused on talent development rather than focusing on pay to play.
Yeah, absolutely. we've established obviously what the club stands for and all of the work that you all do from like outwardly, let's talk about that mutual relationship between how the success of a player, for example, also adds to the reputation and the credibility of the club, that two-way street.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so important. Players, while we say no one player is bigger than the club, they are representatives of the club, as we all are as staff, So we're all very careful about how we represent ourselves. And players are just the same. And that's why I think we have a really amazing squad that are doing great things. They do a lot of work within their communities. They do a lot of work to, say and do the right things, and that's led by our coach company, who is incredible in so many ways. And when he speaks, he's very thoughtful. For me, he says all the right things. So that's representation that works both ways, as you were saying.
Let's talk about how you all measure success, both within your immediate team and the club as a whole. As you all have continued to evolve, as football culture is changing, as you mentioned as well, and it's growing, how do you all continue to work towards those changing benchmarks? Once you've achieved something, it's like, okay, how do you identify what's next? Because it is a balance, as I'm sure you would agree, between seeing how people are reacting and simultaneously thinking 2 to 3 steps ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And, our objectives remain the same throughout. So we want to grow our fan base. We want to form mutually beneficial relationships, whether they're revenue generating or whether they're brand alliances. For example, what we do with the NFL. That started off as content collaborations with the view to play the first regular season game in Germany at the Allianz Arena, which took place in 2022. And then there's the grow the sport on and off the field. So that's kind of that grassroots piece that I was talking about. So those objectives kind of remain. And it's like what you just said. There's different ways of doing it. There's a lot of trial and error. Let's try this. Let's do this. How are we going to figure this out? What do we do differently at this point? Another thing we're thinking about is, fans just are they consume differently at the moment. We're seeing less and less people signing up for official fan clubs. How do we kind of combat that? How do we create a community without, that specific sign-up mechanism? What does that look like? These are questions we ask ourselves constantly, and always try and find answers and figure out ways to do it with the right partners and go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. What would you say people would be surprised to know from the behind-the-scenes aspect of your role? Maybe something you were surprised to find out now being in your shoes.
Yeah. What would people be surprised about? I think the one thing that I think is surprising is actually my role is twofold. I'm working here, and then, it's about working with external folks and selling the club here, but I'm also doing it in reverse. So we are always kind of educating back to the club. It's like, well, this market's like this is what's happening here. And it's always well received because they know we're here on the ground. Yeah. So it's kind of like a two-way learning process. And I think that's the great thing about Bayern, because I think 11 years ago when we came to the club, came to the US, it could have been like, well, we're Bayern Munich. We are one of the world's most successful teams, and you're going to listen to us and the way we do it. That was never the case. It was always a very humble approach, learning and doing things in a sustainable way. So I think that might be something that's surprising for people, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that there is a trust to it, right? Of they trust you to do the job, you trust them to take your findings and implement it in a meaningful way. You mentioned the Academy on the West Coast, which is super exciting. Is there anything else that you would like to share that maybe hasn't been announced quite yet, that people can look forward to, whether it's here locally in New York or in the Americas or just at the club level worldwide?
Yeah, so we are actually going to be looking to place the 44 players for the U15s and the U17s for the academy. And we're not there yet, but we're really hoping that we're in a place where we can offer fully funded spots. We don't know exactly what that will look like yet, but that's something that we would really love to be able to do if we could.
Wow, so impactful.
Yeah.
Honestly. Okay, to close this out, I would love to know something that you're working towards either professionally or personally, as you look back at how far you've come, and the ways to go as well. I'm sure you have so much more left to do, which is exciting. What would you like to be known for? So prior to entering, any role or anything along those lines, and when you eventually move on to something else, like what would you like to be known for?
Wow, I think personally, I would like to just be known as a good person. It's really important for me. I have a 3-year-old boy, and I'm trying to instill in him about, it's about being a productive and positive part of society, so everyone has to do their bit, and it's about being a good person. So that's the personal side of it. And then professionally, I hope to just keep on doing great things with Bayern. It's a great club, so hopefully we get more and more success as we go. And then who knows, what's next. But it's exciting. And I think football is incredible. I love the game. I love the sport. So hopefully a future that remains in football. We'll see.
Fingers crossed. Well, that's exciting. Thank you so much for your time and giving us an inside scoop about everything that you all do. Obviously, I'm a fan.
Yes.
Obviously, I'm a fan. I love all the work that you are doing. It's exciting to see how you all continue to grow and be present in all of these moments. I do think it's unique, having am still obviously a lifelong football follower. First of the Colombia.
Of course.
Colombia first.
Do you have a team in
that,
Colombia?
Because I was raised here in the US, I don't really have an answer for that. Just like the Colombia team, maybe that's, who knows what people will say once I share that. But I was born in Bogota.
Yeah.
Most of my family is from Bogota. So some people would say Millonarios. However, I wasn't raised with a home team necessarily. It was just like whenever Colombia was playing, I'm showing up,
exactly.
And so that's partially why I asked you about the relationship between those who are following players and eventually land on a club and those who decide to stay, because I do think that that's a huge entry point for people like me who love the sport already and as a byproduct, get to meet a team like Bayern. And now I will say that I am a fan of Bayern beyond just Lucho, beyond James previously, but really because I've been able to see firsthand all of the values that you will talk about. And it is refreshing to see that, yes, of course, it sounds nice, but you also put it into practice.
Exactly.
And that is key.
Yeah.
So yes, I'm excited. I'm excited about what's to come.
I'm glad. One down, another 100 million to go. So
thank you again.
Thank you.
I hope you come back whenever you would like, and I will be rooting for you all at a distance. And thank you all for listening and watching. Until next time.